Okay, so today we're diving into something pretty unique. It's Eliane Rodriguez's Dreamscape album.
Really fascinating approach.
Yeah, and we've got her taking on these two Chopin piano concertos, right? But then on top of that, all 24 preludes.
Yeah, it's like a massive undertaking.
It is. And she does this all without a conductor.
Which is wild, right? I mean, talk about a power move, leading the entire orchestra from the piano.
I mean, it takes a certain kind of musician to even attempt that.
Definitely. And Rodriguez, she's got the chops for it, composing by age 7, tackling these huge concertos when most kids are still like figuring out long division,
It's true. I mean, she was practically born on the piano.
Right. And you can hear that lifetime of experience in every note she plays. But even with all this conductorless thing, it's next level. I mean, it's like taking a perfectly good safety net and tossing it out the window.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So how does this even work then? What's the sound like? What are we listening for?
So Rodrigues talks about wanting the orchestra to function like a giant chamber group.
Okay, which for anyone who doesn't live and breathe classical music like we do.
Right, sorry. It's basically like saying instead of having a conductor be the boss, keeping everyone in line, everyone has to be so in tune with each other that they're practically reading each other's minds.
Okay, yeah, so way more collaborative.
Exactly like a conversation instead of a lecture.
And she's having this conversation with the whole orchestra.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not just a small ensemble. We're talking about a full-blown symphony orchestra.
Talk about pressure.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But it's also where this whole thing gets really interesting.
How so?
Well, we're lucky enough to have these amazing insights, not just from Rodriguez herself, but also from Stefan Hilpinish. He's a viola player with the Brussels Philharmonic who actually worked on this recording.
Oh, very cool. So he got that firsthand experience.
Exactly. And he talks about how at first it was a total shock to the system, like everyone's used to having a conductor there to guide them, but suddenly they're on their own.
Had they ever worked with Rodriguez like this before?
Nope. So this was all brand new territory for them.
Wow. So how do they adjust? I mean, did they have like tons of rehearsals to figure it all out?
Surprisingly, no. They had really limited time, which makes the whole thing even more impressive.
And that's kind of incredible.
It is. And Hilpinish talks about this moment where everything just kind of clicked.
I love when that happens.
Right. It's like this magical thing where suddenly everyone's not just playing together, they're breathing together. And he even gets chills describing how powerful the music became in that moment.
That's the holy grail for any musician, right? That sense of transcendence.
Totally. And it's exactly what Rodriguez is going for. She's not just after technical perfection. She wants to dig into the raw emotion at the heart of Chopin's work.
And she's doing it with like zero safety net.
Right. And that's where her vision really shines through because she's not afraid to take risks.
Give me an example.
Okay, so take the second movement of Concerto No. 2, right? So Chopin writes this beautiful melody, and traditionally it's played by the strings.
Okay, makes sense.
But Rodriguez, she gives it to the oboe. Yeah, it's this unexpected twist that suddenly throws the whole piece into this completely different light.
So it's like she's highlighting a different voice within the music.
Exactly, and it creates this incredible sense of solitude, like we're suddenly alone with Chopin's most private thoughts.
I love that you said that because it's not just about rearranging notes. It's about uncovering something deeper, something more vulnerable.
That's exactly it. And it's such a brilliant example of how Rodriguez uses her interpretation to completely change the way we experience a piece of music that we might think we already know.
So she's not afraid to mess with the formula a little bit?
Not at all. In fact, she takes it even further.
How so?
She actually composes her own cadenza for the second concerto.
Okay, now hold on a second. A cadenza is like...
It's that virtuosic solo section that's all about showing off.
Right, like the musical equivalent of a fireworks display.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Chopin, he didn't write one for this piece.
He didn't?
Nope. But Rodriguez, she puts one right in the middle of the movement.
Wow, talk about a bold move.
It is. And it's not just any cadenza either. It's like stepping into a dream.
I was going to say that the liner notes actually describe it as disrupting time.
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's like she creates this moment of suspended reality where you're completely immersed in the emotion of the music.
And it's just the tip of the iceberg because the way she structures the entire Dreamscape album is deliberate too.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So she doesn't just record the concertos back to back, she interweaves them with all 24 of Chopin's preludes.
Which is a lot of preludes.
It is, and each one is like this little emotional snapshot capturing a different mood or feeling.
So she's creating this incredible dialogue between these grand sweeping concertos and these really intimate, personal preludes.
Exactly like she's saying, Chopin's music is big enough to hold all of it, the epic and the personal, the light and the dark.
And it's not just Chopin's personal life that's woven into this music, is it?
Right, because then you have Rodrigues' own story, her own personal connection to the preludes. She was caring for her dying mother while she was working on this album.
Wow. So you've got the weight of Chopin's life, Rodrigues' life, and this incredibly demanding musical approach all coming together in this one album.
It's heavy stuff.
It is, but it's also incredibly beautiful.
It really is, and it speaks to something really powerful about how we experience music as human beings.
What do you mean?
Well, knowing the story behind the music, both the composers and the performers, it can completely change the way we hear it.
It's like adding this whole other layer of meaning.
Exactly. It's like looking at a painting and knowing the artist's life story. Their struggles, their joys, suddenly the colors seem brighter, the brush strokes more deliberate.
So it's like you're not just hearing the music, you're feeling the history resonating through it.
Exactly. You're connecting with the human experience that inspired it, and that's what makes it so powerful.
That's what makes it art.
Exactly.
It's like each note is infused with this like extra emotional weight, you know?
Right. It's not just ink on a page anymore. It's like lived experience poured into sound.
Exactly. And this is where Rodrigues' choice to record all 24 preludes gets even more interesting, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely, because each prelude is like this tiny world unto itself, you know, a complete emotional landscape in miniature.
Yeah. And by putting them alongside these massive concertos, it's like she's creating this incredible dialogue between the micro and the macro.
It's like she's holding up a magnifying glass to the human experience, saying, look at the epic sweep of a life, and look at these tiny fleeting moments. They're both essential.
They both tell a story.
Exactly. And speaking of stories, you mentioned earlier how Rodrigues takes liberties with the score. What are some other ways she does that besides that oboe solo in Concerto No. 2?
Oh, yeah. So she plays with tempo and dynamics in ways that are super unexpected. Like sometimes she'll stretch out a phrase and it's almost like she's savoring the notes.
Like she's letting them breathe.
Yes, exactly. And then other times she just explodes forward with this raw energy that's almost shocking.
It's like she's constantly keeping you on the edge of your seat, never letting you settle into a groove.
Right. You never know what's coming next.
Which is part of what makes it so exciting.
But I imagine that's got to be a little jarring for some listeners, especially if they're used to hearing Chopin played a certain way.
Oh, for sure. I mean, anytime an artist challenges the status quo, there are going to be people who push back.
So how have the critics responded to this album?
Well, the liner notes describe Rodrigues playing as groundbreaking and a clash of ideas that sparks new light. So they're definitely picking up what she's putting down.
That's great. And what about Hulpenich, the viola player? What does he have to say about it?
Well, he talks about getting chills during the recording.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he says there was this one moment where everything just clicked, you know, and the music took on a life of its own.
That's amazing.
It is. And it just goes to show that Rodrigues' passion is infectious. I mean, you can't help but get swept up in it.
That's what I love about music when it's done right. It transcends technique and becomes this purely visceral experience.
Totally. Like you're not just hearing it, you're feeling it in your bones.
Exactly.
And that's the mark of a true artist, the ability to connect with the listener on that level.
It's about communicating something deeper, something more profound.
Exactly. And with this album, Rodrigues takes it a step further by actually sharing her own personal connection to the music.
Right, by letting us in on the fact that she was caring for her mother while she was recording it.
It adds this incredible layer of intimacy to the whole thing. Like, she's inviting us into her grief, her vulnerability, and saying, this is what Chopin means to me. This is how it helped me through a really difficult time.
That's so powerful. And it makes me think about how often we listen to music as a way to process our own emotions, you know?
Absolutely. Like music becomes this sonic mirror reflecting back our own joys and sorrows.
Exactly. So when we listen to Dreamscape, we're not just experiencing Chopin's grief or even Rodrigues' grief. We're also connecting with our own.
Exactly. And that's a really powerful thing.
It is. It's like this shared human experience that transcends time and space.
And that's the beauty of music, isn't it? Its ability to connect us all on this really deep level.
Absolutely. It reminds us that we're not alone in our suffering or our joy.
And that even in the darkest of times, there's always beauty to be found.
And sometimes it takes a really brave artist to shine a light on it.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
It's interesting, though, right? Because it makes you wonder if you can ever really hear a piece of music for the first time again. You know, especially something like Chopin that's been played and replayed for centuries.
Yeah, it's like, can you ever truly wipe the slate clean, so to speak?
Right, because we all bring our own baggage to the listening experience, don't we? Like our own preconceived notions of how something should sound.
Absolutely. And our own personal histories with the music too. Like maybe you heard a certain piece at a specific moment in your life and it's forever tied to that memory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I do think that a truly great interpretation like what Rodriguez does here, it
Yeah.
can cut through all of that noise.
Totally. It's like she's pushing all of that aside and saying, listen to this with fresh ears.
Yes, and not just fresh ears, but an open heart too.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because it's not about erasing what you already know. It's about adding to it, challenging it.
It's about expanding your understanding of the music and maybe even yourself in the process.
Beautifully said. And that's what Rodriguez does so brilliantly in Dreamscape. She takes these pieces, these cornerstones of classical music, and she turns them inside out.
It's like she's found a new way to eliminate them.
Yes, and to make them resonate with a modern audience.
So for someone listening to this right now, someone who maybe thinks they know Chopin, what would you say is the one thing they should listen for when they put on Dreamscape?
Listen for the moments that surprise you, the places where Rodriguez takes a familiar melody and twists it, stretches it, or turns it on its head.
Pay attention to the unexpected.
Exactly. And listen to how she uses the orchestra, the way she creates these incredible dialogues between the instruments.
It's like this whole other level of storytelling.
It is. And most importantly, listen with an open mind and an open heart. Let yourself be swept away by the emotional intensity of her playing, because that's what makes this album so special.
Because ultimately, music is about more than just notes on a page, isn't it? It's about connecting with something larger than ourselves, about feeling something deeply and profoundly human.
Beautifully put. And Rodriguez's Dreamscape is a powerful and moving reminder of that truth.
It's an invitation to experience Chopin in a whole new light, to feel the full weight of his genius, and maybe even to discover something new about ourselves in the process.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So for our listeners, we'll be sure to include a link to Dreamscape in the show notes. Give it a listen and let us know what you think. Does Eliane Rodrigues make you hear Chopin for the first time again?
It's a question worth pondering as you immerse yourself in this incredible musical experience.
And on that note, we'll leave you to dive in. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those ears open for the unexpected.